The rhythmic thrum of Sharon's gait was a familiar lullaby to me. My name is Elias Thorne, and for the past 10 years, this remote Antarctic research station, a steel and ice cocoon against the world's harshest wilderness, has been my home. I was the lead engineer, the station's heart and lungs, its nervous system. My past as a submariner trapped beneath miles of water had taught me to listen, not with my ears alone, but with my whole body, feeling the subtle vibrations through the deck plates, tasting the air, smelling the faint tang of ozone or coolant. Every machine, from the smallest HVAC unit to the massive reactor, sang its own song. A complex symphony of whirs and clicks, hums and groans. My job, my gift, was to hear the wrong note before it became a discord, before it shattered the harmony. For years, the song here had been steady, predictable, if a little lonely. But something was about to change the tune. 3 days earlier, the first wrong note had struck. I was in the machine shop, calibrating a new filtration unit, when Dr. Chloe Reed's voice crackled over the comms. A raw tremor of disbelief and excitement. "Elias, Dr. Kael, anyone, you need to see this. Subglacial radar, I think I've found something impossible." I'd made my way to the subglacial imaging lab, finding Chloe, a young geophysicist, staring wide-eyed at a sonar screen. A perfectly geometric shape, an impossible cube, a mile beneath us. Not a natural formation, not a rock. It pulsed with an alien symmetry that defied all understanding. Dr. Victor Kael arrived then, his eyes immediately alight, with a predatory gleam, not of scientific curiosity, but of pure, unadulterated ambition. He'd seen his legacy, his Nobel Prize, frozen beneath the ice. An immediate, intact excavation. He'd barked, overriding Chloe's stunned stammering. "Nothing is to be damaged. This is mine." I felt a shiver then, not from the cold but from something far colder. The excavation was a Herculean effort. I watched the feeds from the subglacial dig site, deep in the crushing darkness. Tex Beaumont, our burly head mechanic, a man whose hands were as big as frying pans and whose drawl was as thick as molasses, was in charge. His voice, usually booming, was hushed with concentration as he directed the cryolens team. Beams of supercooled plasma sliced through the ancient ice, not melting it, but fracturing it with surgical precision. They were cutting free a block the size of a small house, containing whatever impossible thing Chloe had found. The work was slow, laborious, each cut a testament to human ingenuity against an indifferent world. Beneath the ice, in that freezing, claustrophobic environment, they worked with an almost reverent focus, slowly, painstakingly, separating the colossal cube from its millennia-old tomb. The journey to the icehouse, our core research lab, was a silent procession. The massive ice block, cradled on a specialized electromagnetic rig, glided like a ghost through the station's subglacial tunnels. The air hummed with the straining power field, but otherwise, a profound silence had fallen over the crew. No jokes, no casual chatter. Just the focused, grim expressions of men and women who knew they were transporting something profoundly significant, perhaps profoundly dangerous. Tex walked alongside the rig, his usual swagger replaced by a stoic watchfulness. I watched them pass, the shadows dancing on the tunnel walls, cast by the rig's work lights. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a hushed reverence that felt less like awe and more like a premonition. The reveal in the icehouse was a punch to the gut. The thermal lamps had done their work, and as the last opaque layers of ice sublimated away, the full horror of our discovery was laid bare. The station crew, gathered in a semicircle, stood in stunned, silent disbelief. My breath hitched. Suspended within the ice, perfectly preserved, was the contorted face of a Neanderthal. Its mouth was open in a silent scream, eyes wide with a terror that transcended millennia. And beneath it, cradled in the ice, was the machine. It was about 7 feet tall, shaped like a fat donut, its surface a polished iridescent ivory, veined with dull copper. It was alien, impossibly intricate, and radiating an unsettling, silent presence. The contrast between the ancient, frozen scream and the eerie, unnatural beauty of the machine was a sight that would forever haunt my nightmares. My engineer's mind, always searching for function, immediately began to catalog the details. Thousands of perfectly uniform, tiny holes perforated the ivory surface of the machine, like some grotesque filter. And then I saw the other things. Crushed, flattened remains of what looked like a cave bear, an Irish elk, pressed into the ice around the machine, barely discernible, and another Neanderthal's hand, reaching out, frozen in a gesture of futile despair. It wasn't a fight, I realized with a chilling certainty that turned my blood to ice. It was systematic. This wasn't a weapon, or a vessel, or even a tool in the way we understood them. It was a mobile harvester. A machine for processing life. A factory line, designed to take things apart, to extract something. The thought was colder, more terrifying than anything the Antarctic could throw at me. This wasn't just ancient, it was malevolent in its very design. The reactions around me were a microcosm of humanity's conflicting impulses. Dr. Kael was practically vibrating, his face beaming with a proprietary awe. "A new chapter in human history," he declared, his voice echoing in the cavernous icehouse. Tex, ever the pragmatist, just grunted. "Looks like something, ate a whole lot of lunch, and then froze solid." But I saw only danger, a silent, ancient predator that had just awakened. The machine hummed with an almost imperceptible vibration, a low frequency that settled deep in my bones. Kael, ignoring the unease, ignored the screaming Neanderthal, clapped his hands together. "Senior staff to the command center, immediately. We have much to discuss and even more to accomplish." His voice brooked no argument, only compliance. The urgency in his tone was less about discovery and more about claiming his prize. In the command center, Kael held court. He stood at the head of the polished steel table, bathed in the glow of the holographic displays, his chest puffed out like a peacock. "This," he announced, gesturing grandly to the faint image of the artifact on the main screen, "is the single greatest discovery in human history, and I, Dr. Victor Kael, claim it as such. From this moment forward, it shall be known as the Kael Artifact." A few of the younger scientists, Dr. Ben Carter among them, clapped enthusiastically. Tex just rolled his eyes, a low rumble of disapproval in his throat. Kael's gaze then fell on me. "Thorne, I want thermal lamps rigged. I want that ice block thawed, now." His eyes dared me to object, but his tone left no room for discussion. The sheer recklessness of the command made my stomach clench. "Dr. Kael," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "With all due respect, we have no idea what this thing is, what it does. It appears to be an unknown, unshielded power source. Thawing it without proper containment protocols, without even understanding its basic function, would be catastrophically reckless." Kael simply waved a dismissive hand, a sneer twisting his lips. "Engineer, your concerns are noted, and utterly irrelevant. We are on the precipice of a scientific revolution. We don't have time for your Luddite anxieties." Beside him, Dr. Ben Carter, a young biologist whose enthusiasm often outstripped his caution, practically bounced in his seat. "Indeed, Elias. The structural integrity, the thermal signature of the artifact itself, suggests an inherent stability. Perhaps the ambient heat will act as a catalyst, an activator, allowing us to study it in its operational state." He spoke with such wide-eyed eagerness, completely blind to the danger I knew was staring us in the face. I knew it was futile, but I had to try. "I formally log my recommendation against this plan, sir. For the record." My voice was flat, devoid of emotion, as I spoke into the comms system, ensuring the official record would reflect my protest. Captain Leo Vance, the deputy station chief, a man whose spine was made of pure procedure, stepped forward then. He met my gaze, a flicker of concern in his eyes, but his voice was firm. "Elias, your objections are on record. However, Dr. Kael's command is direct. We are bound by the chain of command." He paused, then added, "You have your orders, engineer." I looked from Kael's smug, triumphant face to Vance's stoic, unyielding one. My shoulders slumped. There was no fighting it. "Not yet." "Understood, Captain," I replied, the words tasting like ash. "I'll get my team." The air in the icehouse was a familiar bite, but the task at hand felt heavier. Tex and I spent 2 hours hauling and rigging 12 industrial-grade thermal lamps, their heavy bases scraping against the reinforced floor. Each clang echoed with a sense of grim inevitability. "Hold it steady, Tex," I grunted, wrestling with a power conduit. He nodded, his face already slick with sweat despite the sub-zero temperatures. My hands, calloused from years of keeping this station alive, moved with practiced efficiency. It was a strange contradiction, this need to do my job perfectly, even when every fiber of my being screamed that the job itself was morally wrong. I knew what Kael wanted, and I knew it was a mistake. But a good engineer always finishes the task. Back in the machine shop, the hum of the station was my lullaby, my constant companion. I brought the thermal lamps online, watching the diagnostics terminal. The grid flickered, a nearly imperceptible dip in voltage. It was a tiny stutter in the station's heartbeat, but I felt it like a bad note in a symphony. My gut tightened. I pulled up the life support feeds. The industrial humidifiers, usually running at a comfortable 70%, were now redlining at 100. Yet, the overall station humidity, measured by a dozen sensors across the hub, was subtly but steadily dropping. It was a paradox, a system working harder to achieve less, or rather to lose more. Something was actively draining the moisture, and I had a terrifying hunch what it was. Later, in the mess hall, the subtle hum of unease was becoming audible. "Anyone else feel like they've been chewing sandpaper?" One of the comms techs grumbled, rubbing his chapped lips. A spark jumped from a mess kit as another crew member reached for a cup. "Static electricity's through the roof," he complained. Dr. Ben Carter, however, was practically vibrating with excitement. "It's incredible, isn't it?" he chirped, oblivious to the general discomfort. "The artifact. It's exuding a metabolic signature, a preservation field perhaps, drawing off ambient moisture, creating a localized desiccation effect. It's like a biological stasis bubble." He gestured wildly, his eyes wide with a scientist's fever, while I just watched, a cold dread settling in my chest. I caught Ben by the arm as he made to leave, his enthusiasm unwavering. "Ben," I said, my voice low, "you gotta know what a thing does before you poke it." He pulled away, a dismissive wave of his hand. "Elias, please. This isn't a faulty heat exchanger. This is a discovery beyond imagination. The data, the pure sample, we have to understand its mechanisms." His eyes, usually bright with curiosity, now held a zealous glint that, frankly, scared me. He was so focused on the how and the what that he was completely blind to the why something would create such an environment in the first place. He was convinced it was benign, a marvel. I saw only a warning. Over the next 36 hours, my dread deepened. The monitors in the machine shop, showing the icehouse feed, revealed a disturbing sight. The massive ice block seemed to weep, rivulets of meltwater tracing paths down its surface. Yet, that water never pooled. It simply vanished. Throughout the station hub, the crew's complaints grew. Thirst was constant, a pervasive dryness that no amount of water could quench. Static cling became a nuisance, then an irritation. My power grid continued to show those greedy spikes, the station's energy being siphoned, absorbed, for some unknown purpose. The machine was waking up, slowly, subtly, and it was drawing from us. A shrill alert cut through the quiet hum of the machine shop. Bioscanner 3, the unit pointed directly at the artifact in the icehouse, was offline. My heart hammered. Ben. I tried to raise him on his comms, a frantic series of clicks and static. Nothing. I switched to the command center frequency. "Vance, it's Elias. Bioscanner 3 is down. And Ben Carter isn't responding." There was a beat of silence. Then Vance's grave voice. "Thorne, Carter missed his last check-in. He was authorized to observe in the icehouse this cycle." A cold wave washed over me. Ben. He'd gone to poke the thing, hadn't he? The connecting corridor to the icehouse was already wrong. The air was noticeably thinner, drier, making my throat ache. Captain Vance waited at the heavy pressure door, his expression grim. "Standard protocol, Thorne. 2-man entry. Don't touch anything until cleared." His voice was tight, a thinly veiled attempt at normalcy. The door hissed open, revealing a wave of hot, utterly arid air that slammed into us like a physical blow. It felt like walking into a desert oven. The ice block, which had been the size of a small house, was now barely half its original mass. And on the pristine, white floor, there was a thin, unsettling layer of fine gray dust. My blood ran cold. The preservation field was more like a vacuum. "Ben?" I called, my voice cracking in the dry air. No answer. We scanned the room, the heat haze shimmering. Then I saw it, a splash of color behind a mobile diagnostic unit, Ben's bright blue coveralls. "There!" I yelled, moving toward it. Vance tried to stop me, a hand reaching out. "Thorne, wait for—" But I was already there, pulling Ben's collapsed form back. His body fell with a dry rustling sound, like a pile of autumn leaves. He was utterly drained of weight, a grotesque, mummified doll. His face, once so eager, was a parchment-like husk, eyes shriveled into pinpricks, lips black and split. In his withered hand, still clutched tightly, was an empty sample container. The horror was absolute. I stared at Ben, then at the silent alien machine, its polished ivory surface now visible where the ice had receded. My engineer's mind, always seeking to understand, clicked into place, but the realization brought no comfort. Ben hadn't died from a fall or an impact. He'd been processed. The thousands of tiny holes on the artifact, the vanishing meltwater, the station-wide desiccation, it wasn't a preservation field. It was a giant desiccant, a living, moving vacuum. "It's not a machine for observation," I breathed, my voice hoarse, turning to Vance. "It's a machine for taking things apart. A factory line. This isn't the Kael Artifact. This is the Panthalasan Sampler." Vance could only stare, his face pale, utterly speechless. Kael swept into the infirmary, where Ben's body lay covered, a stark, still form on the gurney. He took one dismissive glance, a practiced sigh escaping his lips. "A terrible, tragic loss," he pronounced, his voice dripping with forced sincerity that didn't reach his eyes. Dr. Carter was a promising young mind. I stepped forward, my frustration boiling over. "He wasn't lost, Kael. He was processed forward. By that machine, it's a factory line. It draws the moisture from organic matter, leaving nothing but dust." Kael didn't even look at me. His gaze was already fixed on Vance, a cold, calculating glint in his eye. "Captain Vance," he said, completely ignoring my words, "I trust you've initiated the full incident report?" Dr. Kael stood over Ben Carter's covered body in the infirmary, his face a mask of practiced solemnity that barely concealed a cold, calculated ambition. "A terrible, tragic loss," he murmured, his voice echoing in the sterile room. But his eyes, I noticed, didn't linger on Ben. They swept over Vance and me, assessing the damage to his grand plans. "I'm instituting a full incident report, of course," he began, his tone shifting from mournful to authoritative. "And the ice house is under full quarantine. No one enters or leaves without my explicit approval." Then came the real hammer blow. "Furthermore," he continued, his gaze locking with Vance's, "to protect the integrity of this unprecedented discovery, all station communications uplinks will now be routed through my terminal. Station-wide blackout, effective immediately." Vance's face, usually so composed, flickered with a raw struggle between duty and the sheer horror of Kael's pronouncement. He swallowed hard, his jaw working, but ultimately he just gave a stiff nod. My gut clenched. Kael wasn't just covering up, he was sealing us in with a monster. Kael's lockdown transformed Sharon's gate from a research station into a pressure cooker. Fear, thick and palpable, clung to the recycled air in the corridors. The 47 souls trapped here fractured almost immediately. The core science team, blinded by Kael's promises of fame, remained fiercely loyal, whispering about protocols and groundbreaking research. The rest of us, the mechanics, the logistics crew, the support staff, we looked at each other, and then our eyes inevitably found me. I could feel the weight of their unspoken questions, their growing distrust of Kael. The station, once a cohesive unit, was now a powder keg of tension, divided by delusion and dread. 3 days after Ben's death, the subtle hum of the station began to find a new, unsettling counterpoint. I was in the machine shop, keeping a close eye on the icehouse camera feed. That's when I saw it. The Panthalasan Sampler's dull copper veins, which had been inert, began to glow. A soft, sullen red at first, then intensifying, pulsing with a slow, internal rhythm. On my diagnostic monitors, the energy spikes grew stronger, greedier. I grabbed my comms. "Vance, this is Thorne. The artifact is activating. The thermoelectric lattice is online. It's drawing power, Captain. A lot of it." Vance's face appeared on my screen, his expression grim but unyielding. "The quarantine is absolute, Thorne. Dr. Kael's orders. No one is to approach it." My warning, urgent and desperate, was met with rigid adherence to a doomed command. The dread in my stomach solidified. The low hum I'd been hearing grew steadily, vibrating through the station's steel deck plates, a deep, resonant growl from beneath our feet. I braced myself, my hand hovering over the emergency comms, though what I'd say, I didn't know. Then it hit. A single heavy, resonant thumpies that shook the entire station. Lights flickered, dust rained from the vents, and a sudden, sharp crack echoed from somewhere nearby. I stared at the icehouse feed. The artifact had shifted 6 inches in its icy cradle, its internal systems now undeniably, terrifyingly, online. It was awake. The blast door to the machine shop slammed open, and Tex Beaumont burst in, his face flushed with rage, eyes fixed on the vibrating deck plates beneath his boots. He'd felt the thump, too. "That's it," he bellowed, his Texan drawl thick with fury. "Thinking is over." He stomped over to the tool rack, his massive hands grabbing the K5 plasma cutter, its heavy frame humming with dormant power. "That damn thing," he snarled, hefting the cutter like it was a toy. "I'm gonna go take it apart, piece by goddamn piece." His men, a handful of burly mechanics, nodded, their faces grimly determined. "Tex, wait!" I shouted, stepping in front of him, my hand grabbing his arm. He didn't even flinch. "You can't! It's suicide, man!" "You saw what it did to Ben, and it didn't even move. This isn't a machine you can just take apart with a plasma cutter." I tried to make him see reason, to understand the alien nature of the thing. Tex just shook his head, a dismissive grunt escaping his lips. "That egghead probably just poked it with the wrong stick. My reports say this thing's tough, but everything's got a weak spot. And I got the tools to find it." His eyes, usually so full of good humor, were now hard, resolute. He pushed past me, his sheer momentum carrying him forward. Tex, ignoring the emergency door controls Kael had locked down, simply walked up to the icehouse airlock. With a snarl, he pulled out a portable cutting torch, igniting its fierce blue flame. Sparks flew, showering the corridor as he began to slice through the heavy magnetic lock mechanism. The metal shrieked in protest, then groaned, and with a final hiss, the massive door slowly edged open, revealing the dry, chilled air within. It was an open act of mutiny. I knew it, Tex knew it, and the other mechanics knew it. I couldn't let them go alone. My feet moved before my brain could fully process, following them into the breach. The icehouse was a furnace, the air inside hot and utterly arid, a stark contrast to the glacial temperatures outside. Tex didn't hesitate. His boots crunched on the thin layer of dust that coated the floor. Full of unshakable confidence, he planted his feet, aimed the K5 plasma cutter, and ignited it. The cutter roared to life, a blinding violet-white jet of pure energy erupting from its nozzle. The sound vibrated through my bones, deafening in the enclosed space. Tex, a modern-day warrior facing an ancient evil, strode purposefully towards the Panthalasan Sampler, a defiant challenge etched on his soot-streaked face. Tex brought the plasma jet to bear on the sampler's polished ivory surface. The violet-white flame splashed off harmlessly, like water on hot oil, leaving no mark, no scorch, not even a whisper of damage. Tex pushed harder, his muscles bulging, the cutter roaring louder. That's when it happened. One of the thousands of small, perfectly round holes on the sampler's surface emitted a thin, piercing, high-frequency whine. It was subtle at first, then grew in intensity, perfectly matching the plasma cutter's operating frequency. The K5 began to shake violently in Tex's hands, the vibrations rattling his teeth. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just invulnerable. It was intelligent. It was fighting back. The whine from the sampler intensified, a sound that seemed to shred the very air. Tex's plasma cutter, now shaking uncontrollably, began to smoke. He tried to pull away, to disengage, but it was too late. The power pack overloaded with a sickening crackle, and then, boom! A blinding flash of white light, a deafening concussion that threw me backward, slamming me into the metal wall. When my ears stopped ringing, the air was thick with smoke and the horrifying, unmistakable smell of cooked meat. Tex was gone. Vaporized. His men, thrown against the far wall, lay groaning. I pushed myself up, my body aching, my mind reeling from the blast and the gruesome aftermath. My ears rang, a high-pitched shriek that drowned out the blaring klaxons echoing through Sharon's gate. Smoke billowed from the gash Tex had carved in the ice house door, the smell of ozone and cooked flesh thick in the air. I stumbled, dragging Peterson, one of Tex's mechanics, by his coveralls. He was alive, thank God, but barely conscious, his eyes wide with shock. Then I saw it. The Panthalasan Sampler, its dull copper veins now pulsing with a vibrant, malevolent red glow, rolled silently through the jagged opening. It wasn't a machine for study anymore. It was a hunter, and it was free. It glided with an eerie grace, utterly silent, defying gravity as it emerged into the main corridor. The station was no longer a sanctuary. It was a hunting ground. My mind screamed, a frantic mix of terror and engineering logic. The first thing I did was slam the emergency blast door, sealing off the icehouse, a futile gesture now that the monster was out. My fingers flew across the console, pulling up the station schematics. The sampler, a glowing red dot, registered on the monitors. It turned left, directly towards the central hub, the largest cluster of biometric signals on the station. It was following us. Or rather, following the warmth of life. "Attention all personnel," my voice raw with panic crackled over the station-wide comms. "This is Thorne. The artifact is mobile. Repeat, the artifact is loose. Get out of the main ring. Seal your quarters. Use emergency bulkheads. Get to the peripheral sections now." My hands shook, but I kept them moving, hitting every button, trying to divert power, to lock down anything I could. It felt like screaming into a void. Then Kael's voice cut through the chaos, calm, clinical, utterly chilling. "Attention all personnel. Dr. Kael here. Maintain your positions. Do not engage emergency protocols. We are collecting invaluable data on the artifact's mobility. Your cooperation is essential for this unprecedented scientific observation." My blood ran cold. I watched the camera feed, a small window on my monitor, showing Dr. Samuel Hayes, a geologist, stumble in a connecting corridor. The sampler was behind him, gaining ground, its silent glide a harbinger of death. Sam scrambled, desperate, towards a blast door at the far end of the corridor. And then I saw Kael on the command center feed, his face composed, almost serene, at the main lockdown control panel. His finger moved, pressed a button. The distant blast door, Sam's only hope, engaged its maglock, sealing him in. Kael had just trapped him, deliberately. The sheer, horrifying calculation of it made my stomach churn. I watched Kael's face, projected on my comm screen, as Sam Hayes pounded on the now-sealed door. Kael murmured, a low, academic tone. "Observe the localized gravity well. Remarkable efficiency. Invaluable data." His eyes were fixed on his console, on the readouts of Sam's fading life signs, not on the man himself. He was a scientist studying a specimen, not a human observing a murder. Beside Kael, Captain Vance stood rigid, but I could see the subtle tremble in his shoulders, the dawning horror in his eyes. He wasn't looking at the screens. He was looking at Kael. Sam's pleas, faint through the station's dying comms, were ignored, sacrificed for a data point. My outrage burned, a cold, impotent fire against Kael's monstrous detachment. On the camera feed, Dr. Samuel Hayes was a frantic, pathetic figure. He clawed at the sealed door, his feet sliding uselessly as the sampler's gravity well tugged him backward. He stumbled, then fell, a desperate cry muffled by the distance and the failing comms. The perforated ivory surface of the sampler rolled over him. There was no struggle, no scream, just a quiet, methodical erasure. Like Ben, he was simply processed. His blue biometric dot on my schematic blinked once, a final, frantic pulse, then went dark. Just like that. Gone. I saw it happen live, but Kael was already turning, dismissing it, muttering about necessary losses. Captain Vance, however, took a staggering step back from him, a look of utter revulsion twisting his usually stoic features. He shook his head, slowly, as if trying to dislodge a nightmare. An hour later, Vance stood in my machine shop, a wreck of a man. His crisp uniform was rumpled, his rigid composure shattered. He held his HPAD, his hands trembling as he played a recording. Kael's calm, clinical voice, confirming he'd locked the door on Sam Hayes. Vance's lifetime of procedure and protocol had finally broken. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow, and said, He's a monster, Thorne. Not just reckless, a monster. His loyalty, once absolute, was utterly shattered. And I knew, in that moment, we were truly alone against Kael and the thing we'd unearthed. I looked at Vance, then at the station schematics. "We've tried force," I said, the words heavy. "Tech's proved that's useless. We can't outrun it. We can't hide from it." And Kael. I trailed off, the memory of Sam Hayes' last moments a fresh wound. Kael will sacrifice every last one of us for data. He already is. My gaze returned to the schematics, specifically to the station's core. Our only option is containment. This thing cannot leave this continent. Not ever. I pointed to a shielded section. The thermite purge system. It'll scuttle the entire station, melt the ice for a mile around, seal this thing away forever. Vance's eyes widened, understanding the grim implication. The catch? I continued, my voice grim. It requires 2 sequential authorization codes. Mine, for the engineering initiation, and Kael's, for the scientific override. It was a fail-safe against a single rogue element triggering a meltdown. Now it's our ultimate obstacle. There was no more discussion, only grim acceptance. We moved with a silent, practiced efficiency, born of years in hazardous environments. I grabbed a heavy pry bar from the wall, its cold steel familiar in my hands. Vance, moving with a renewed, desperate purpose, went to an armory locker, its magnetic seal already compromised by the station's failing power grid. He retrieved a small, modified explosive charge, the kind used for emergency tunnel collapses. We didn't speak. We just exchanged a silent, grim look of understanding and resolve. This was it, our final mission. And we both knew it was a one-way trip. We descended into the guts of Sharon's gate, the service corridors tight, dark, and partially fried by the power fluctuations the sampler was causing. Exposed conduits sparked occasionally, casting fleeting, ghostly shadows. Vance, his military training kicking in, transformed his fear into logistical planning. He held his HPAD, its dim light tracing our route through the maze of pipes and wires, directly towards the powerhouse, the heart of the station. The air grew thicker, hotter, the metallic tang of ozone ever present. Every creak of the groaning structure, every distant thrum, set my teeth on edge. This was a place where machines whispered, but now a monster roared. As we navigated a particularly tight bottleneck, a section of the corridor where the air was noticeably, unnaturally bone-dry, a fresh layer of fine gray dust coated the floor. It shimmered in the beam of our flashlights, a chilling testament to the sampler's recent passage. It had been here. It was close. Vance and I exchanged a look, grim and knowing. The hunter was on our trail, its presence a physical sensation, a parched breath down our necks. We pressed on, our footsteps muffled, each breath a silent prayer against the inevitable. The rhythmic thrum of the station's failing systems had become a constant companion, but now something else joined it. A low, resonant hum pulsed through the very deck plates beneath my feet, growing steadily. Vance and I had reached a 4-way junction, a cramped, dark space where exposed conduits snaked like metallic vines. Then, a rattling tool cart slid into view from the forward tunnel, followed by the soft click of a dislodged bolt. My blood ran cold, the gravity well. It was close. Too close. "Damn it!" I hissed, pulling Vance back into the shadow of a massive ventilation shaft. The sampler, a silent, ivory phantom, rolled into the junction, blocking the only viable path forward. a collapsed tunnel we'd hoped to squeeze through. It didn't pause, didn't seem to notice us yet, but its sheer bulk filled the narrow space, pinning us. We were trapped, caught between an active monster and a dead end. Fear, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. My mind raced, searching for an escape, a bypass, anything. But Vance, his face grim, was already formulating a plan. His eyes, usually so rigid, now burned with a desperate, calculating fire. He spotted a reinforced diesel fuel conduit, thick as my arm, running along the wall just beyond the sampler's radius. He turned to me, grabbing the heavy pry bar from my hand. His other hand pressed his HPAD into mine, his thumb quickly tapping something into the screen. Our eyes met, a wordless communication of grim resolve, and a dawning, terrible understanding of what he intended. Elias. Vance's voice was low, strained, but utterly firm. You have to make it to the powerhouse. Kael's key location is on the HPAD. Raska, that is a direct order. Go. Before I could even protest, he was moving. He sprinted, not towards the sampler, but parallel to it, drawing its attention with his sudden movement. The sampler's glowing veins pulsed, its gravity well subtly shifting, acknowledging the new, moving target. Vance slammed the pry bar into the diesel fuel conduit, a sickening crunch of metal. A high-pressure geyser of thick, yellow-brown fuel erupted, spraying across the narrow corridor, drenching the sampler's side. With a guttural grunt, Vance grabbed a severed, sparking power cable, ripped from the recent explosion, and plunged it into the diesel stream. The world erupted. A blinding flash of white fire consumed the junction, followed by a roaring thunder that tore through the very structure of the station. The force of the blast slammed me against the wall, knocking the wind from my lungs, the HPAD clattering from my grasp. My ears rang, a deafening silence punctuated by the crackle of flames. Smoke choked the air, stinging my eyes as I struggled to my feet. Every muscle screamed in protest, my head throbbing from the impact. But the image of Vance's determined face, his final, desperate command, burned in my mind. He had bought me time. He had cleared the path, at the ultimate cost. I scrambled for the HPAD, its glowing screen a beacon in the smoke-filled chaos. Kael's key location pulsed on the map. A grim target. Vance's sacrifice would not be in vain. I pushed through the burning debris, one foot in front of the other, a lone figure in a world consumed by fire and grief. The blast door to the powerhouse was mangled, twisted metal hanging precariously from its hinges. I stumbled through the wreckage, gasping for breath, the heat intense even in here. And there he was, Dr. Victor Kael. He stood before the emergency override panel, a heavy crowbar in his hands, grunting with effort as he tried to pry open the reinforced casing, destroy the purge system's circuitry. His face was smeared with soot, his eyes wide and feverish, reflecting the dancing flames from the corridor. He looked less like a scientist, and more like a mad prophet. He spun around, catching sight of me. "Thorne!" he snarled, his voice hoarse, a mix of rage and desperation. "You vandal! You'd destroy humanity's greatest discovery." "It's not a discovery, Kael. It's a plague," I yelled back, clutching my data key. "Give me your key. Now." Kael just laughed, a maniacal, broken sound that echoed in the damaged powerhouse. "Never! This is a new genesis, a new path for humanity." His eyes darted to the mangled doorway behind me, then back to the glowing copper veins on my internal monitor. The gravity well was intensifying. The sampler was almost here. "It's coming for the reactor, Kael," I warned, but he was beyond reason. He clutched the chain around his neck, where I knew his data key hung. I had no choice. With a guttural cry, I tackled him, sending us both sprawling across the grated floor. The fight was clumsy, desperate, a primal struggle for survival and the fate of the station. We grappled, grunting, my hands clawing for the chain, his flailing wildly to keep me away. Kael, fueled by his delusion, managed to knee me hard in the ribs, sending a searing bolt of pain through me. I gasped, but the pain only sharpened my resolve. I kicked out, my boot connecting with his knee with a sickening crack. Kael screamed, a raw, animal sound, and crumpled. I didn't hesitate. I pounced, grabbing the chain around his neck, yanking harder. Harder, until the metal links groaned, then snapped. Kael's data key, cold and metallic, was in my hand. He lay on the floor, clutching his shattered knee, his face twisted not just with agony, but with a pure, unadulterated hatred that chilled me to the bone. Suddenly the low thrum of the gravity well stopped. The sampler rolled through the mangled doorway, its copper veins pulsing with a vibrant, triumphant glow. It ignored me, ignored Kael, gliding silently, inexorably, towards the shimmering blue heart of the powerhouse, the reactor tank. Kael, propped on one elbow, watched it, his feverish eyes wide with a terrifying, religious awe. "It understands," he breathed, his voice a ragged whisper. "It sees divinity." He began to drag himself across the floor, his broken leg useless, crawling, reaching towards the machine, towards his genesis, his discovery. The irony was unbearable. My hands, shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion, fumbled with the 2 data keys. I jammed mine into the emergency override panel, then Kael's. "No!" Kael shrieked, his voice regaining its manic strength, a desperate final protest. "You are erasing history! You are erasing history!" I twisted both keys simultaneously. 2 green lights blinked on, illuminating my sweat-streaked face. At that exact moment, the sampler rolled over Kael's good leg, finally acknowledging his presence. The desiccating effect was instantaneous, horrifyingly quick. Kael's scream turned into a dry, rattling hiss, his body withering, shrinking before my eyes. A fine gray dust, like the dust I'd seen on the icehouse floor, puffed from his coveralls. He became its final footnote, consumed by the very thing he'd worshipped. I pressed the heavy black button. The station screamed, a blaring klaxon tearing through the air, red light strobing, painting the powerhouse in a hellish glow. A calm, automated voice, utterly devoid of emotion, announced, "Thermite purge system activated. Reactor scuttle sequence initiated. Detonation in 10 minutes." The sampler, now fully aware, stopped. It sensed the threat. Its glowing copper veins flared. Slowly, inexorably, it turned, its smooth ivory surface reflecting the strobing red, and began to roll directly towards me, towards the control panel. I was injured, exhausted, but a strange, quiet peace settled over me. I leaned against the console, watching it come, accepting my fate. The mission was complete. I can almost hear the official pronouncements, the carefully crafted lies. My sacrifice, our sacrifice, reduced to a convenient truth. The official report, filed away in some pristine government archive on a world I saved, attributes the loss of Sharon's gate and all 47 souls to a, quote, catastrophic reactor failure. A neat, tidy explanation, easily digestible by a public that prefers ignorance to terror. End Kael. Dr. Victor Kael's name, listed first on a gleaming memorial plaque posthumously honored for his discovery. The irony of it is a cold, bitter taste. Even in this state of detached observation, his ambition rewarded, our warnings erased. Decades pass, then centuries. My perception, now untethered, watches the Antarctic ice sheet, a vast, white canvas, where Sharon's gate once stood. A mile-wide crater of black obsidian-like glass scars the landscape. Sterile, named the Raska crater, a subtle, almost accidental nod to my past, a name no one living connects to the engineer who died. It remains a forbidden zone, a silent testament to an unknown they prefer to ignore. A grim monument, forged from my last act, standing against the indifferent march of time. And then my perception shifts, stretches, beyond the confines of Earth, beyond time itself. I see it now, or I sense it, a vast, cold intelligence. An automated archival hub, light years away, a silent sentinel in the void. Over 100 millennia later, it monitors countless assets. One, Unit 734, the Panthalasan Sampler, has been silent for a prolonged period. From its last known coordinates, nothing. The AI initiates a routine check. A distant echo, a ripple across the cosmic ocean, of the storm I unleashed to save a world. I feel its protocols unfold, a logical, indifferent search through galactic energy archives. It cross-references, sifting through eons of data, a meticulous ledger of cosmic events. It finds a minor localized thermal nuclear event on Sol 3 inches, Earth's designation in its vast database. The event correlates precisely with Unit 734's last signal, a blip. A momentary flicker in the cold, logical processing of an entity that measures time in geological epochs. Our struggle, our terror, reduced to a data point. The hub updates Unit 734's file. Status: terminated. Mission: incomplete. It records the termination as a, quote, resolution log and archive. No further action required. I sense a brief, almost imperceptible calculation of efficiency loss, a cold mathematical sigh in the vastness. It doesn't mourn, it doesn't question. It simply updates. A quiet, cosmic triumph, perhaps, that my desperate act registered as an anomaly significant enough to interrupt such an indifferent system. The sampler's purpose, halted by a few short-lived beings. I watch, or rather I am watched, as Earth spins, a fragile blue marble in the cosmic tapestry. Countless cycles of ice ages and thaws will pass over the Raska crater. The echoes of my sacrifice, our sacrifice, fade into the cosmic silence, unknown, unrecorded by any higher power. It's a humbling, terrifying thought. We fought for our survival, for our species, for our tiny corner of the universe, and in the grand scheme it was a whisper. A brief, desperate flare against an infinite, uncaring night. The Raska crater, a sterile black wound, will persist for eons. A geological anomaly that whispers of a battle long forgotten by the living, slowly being covered by new ice, yet never truly erased. It's a silent monument to a desperate gamble. No human will ever fully comprehend the heroic acts that prevented a cosmic horror from spreading. No alien will care. We are footnotes in a story too vast for us to ever truly understand. Our triumphs and tragedies swallowed by the endless, hungry void. My consciousness drifts into the ultimate void, a terrifying, absolute emptiness. I ponder how many other samplers, how many other silent threats exist out there. Countless, I imagine. Worlds consumed, civilizations erased, all without a ripple in the cosmic ocean. The silence is absolute, pregnant with infinite possibilities and unrecorded horrors. We are so small, so fragile. And the universe is so much bigger, so much colder than we could ever truly comprehend. Earth, my home, becomes a tiny, fragile speck of blue in the cosmic tapestry. The memory of Sharon's gate, of Kael, of Vance, even of myself, begins to fade from my focus. A final, poignant farewell to the world I saved, and the lives that were lost. The stars, once a source of wonder, now seem like distant, indifferent eyes. My perception, my lingering awareness, slowly dims. The screen, my final window onto existence, slowly fades to black. Silence. An absolute, profound silence. Then, a final, almost imperceptible whisper of static, a faint echo from the void, a ghost of a sound I once knew from a faulty comms unit. And then, nothing.